The next structural element that we want to review is the aside element. If we look at the completed example that we're going to be building together, you'll notice we don't really have the need for an aside element, but that doesn't mean I don't want to review what it is and when and why you would use it. I'm going to come over to this document called Right Sidebar, which is located inside the HTML5 up directory, which is found inside your exercise files folder. So what we're looking at here is a layout that consists of a right sidebar, and that's exactly what the aside element is used for, to create sidebars. But of course, in the world of web design, it's not always cut and dry like that. You can use the aside in different situations. But in this case, the sidebar represents a group of content that would have some type of relationship to the main content on the page. To get a better understanding of the aside element, I think we should visit the W3C's website. Now, as a new designer or developer, my best guess is that you're going to use the aside strictly for sidebars, but I just want to point out that that's not the only scenario where it would be appropriate. The definition on the W3C's website reads like this. The aside element represents a section of a page that consists of content that is tangentially related to the content around the aside element, and which could be considered separate from the content. Such sections are often represented as sidebars in printed typography, but also, let's be honest, it's also represented as a sidebar in web design. But I did want to point out that the element can be used for typographical effects like pull quotes, or sidebars, of course, for advertising, for groups of nav elements, and other content that is considered separate from the main content on the page, but yet shares some type of relationship. If you scroll down, you'll see examples of when the aside element would be appropriate outside of a traditional sidebar setup. And here, if we take a look at the code, this example shows an aside being used to mark up background material on Switzerland in a much longer news story on Europe. So again, visually speaking, yes, it typically appears as a sidebar, but remember, we're not talking about the visual representation of our content just yet. So remember that these structural elements are really a way to group your content. Ultimately, yes, it probably will appear as a sidebar, but that doesn't always have to be the case. So just keep that in mind. And of course, if you want to insert an aside inside of Dreamweaver, it's just like inserting any other element. You can come over to the Insert panel and click on the Aside button.